If you're listening right now, I want you to imagine this: an entire galactic council panicking over a single human and his pet. Before we begin, make sure to hit that like button, comment where you're watching from, and subscribe for more stories that prove humans are the true apex predators of the universe. The chamber lights glowed dim and cold, illuminating the stone-like scales of Elder Carthuin as he stood at the central podium. His breath rattled through the amplifier at his throat, echoing against the domed walls of the council hall orbiting Sirius Prime. Around him sat hundreds of delegates, scaled, feathered, furred and chitin-plated beings, all silent as they watched the trembling data screen flicker. This, Carthuin's voice cracked with an emotion rare for his species, fear. This footage was received from orbital observation drones 3 planetary rotations ago. It confirms our worst assumptions. A fresh wave of murmurs swept the chamber like wind rattling hollow reeds. The youngest scholar present, Thrixer, leaned forward on his many-jointed elbows, mandibles clacking with anxiety. The footage played in silence. Snow fell in slow spirals across a clearing of skeletal birch trees. At its center knelt a human male, broad-shouldered, head shaved to pale stubble, wearing nothing but thick canvas pants and fur-lined boots. His hands were bare despite the biting frost. Blood stained the snow before him as he carved chunks of steaming meat from a massive elk carcass. Behind him, almost blending into the gray forest shadows, was something that froze even the reptilian delegates in primal terror. Its amber eyes burned like twin coals above long, curling whiskers. Its fur rippled with each slow breath, massive paws kneading the snow as it waited. The human turned slightly. His voice came out low, calm, vibrating through the drone's translator systems. "Easy, girl. Here." He tossed a chunk of meat over his shoulder without looking. The predator lunged, jaws wide, teeth like scimitars flashing in the winter sun before it closed them with a muted crunch around the meat. Then it lay down again, tail sweeping snow aside, content. Carthuin paused the footage. "Delegates of the council," he rasped, curling his claws against the podium to steady himself. "The creature you see is Panthera tigris altaica. Humans call it a Siberian tiger. It is the apex predator of their northern forests. For reference," he gestured to another screen as schematics appeared. "These creatures weigh up to 350 kilograms, stand at 1.2 meters at the shoulder, and can shatter bone with a single strike." The chamber remained silent, but their hearts pounded with an identical conclusion. The human in the footage, Jackson Reed, rose to his feet, wiping his bloody hands on the snow. He towered even among his own kind at nearly 2 meters. Muscles rolled under pale skin scarred from old injuries. He picked up another chunk of meat, turned and knelt before the tiger. The beast's massive head lowered to his chest as it rumbled with a deep purr, brushing his cheek with its whiskers. "He treats it like a companion," Thrixer whispered into the silent hall. He's tamed it." Carthuin swallowed, feeling the cool trickle of mucus down the back of his throat. "Indeed, young scholar. Our surveillance confirms repeated interactions. He feeds it daily. He walks with it through its territory. It sleeps beside his shelter." The chamber erupted. "He has domesticated a Class 12 Death World apex predator," screeched Counselor Vishta, her silver feathers puffed in panic. "What happens when he teaches others?" "Do you realize what this means?" roared Corthian, a thick-scaled guard commander whose people prided themselves as warrior elites. "If humans can tame apex predators, they could deploy them as living weapons. Their armies could sweep entire colonies with beasts immune to our technology." Carthuin raised his gnarled hand and silence fell again. His scaled fingers trembled. "Delegates, you forget our history with Earth. Our first contact teams were decimated by their microorganisms alone. Their planet is ranked highest on the Galactic Hazard Index. Its atmospheric storms are lethal. Its tectonic movements destabilize structures within weeks. Its oceans host creatures that dwarf our largest aquatic species. The humans themselves are relatively small, but their minds," he tapped his brow ridge softly, "their minds adapt to everything." Thrixer raised a thin arm. "Elder, permission to speak candidly?" Carthuin nodded. "If a human can tame the deadliest predator on Earth," Thrixer said, mandibles trembling with the words, "then, it is no longer the deadliest predator on Earth. He is." Silence answered him, long and suffocating. Even the filtration fans overhead seemed to pause in solemn agreement. Carthuin inhaled slowly, collecting the mantle of command across his hunched shoulders. "We must verify the extent of this domestication. Perhaps it is a trick of pheromones or neural implants, or conditioning beyond what we currently understand. We must not assume his methods are transferable to other humans until confirmed. Vishta shivered. You propose sending a team to Earth? I propose sending an investigative envoy to observe directly, Carthuan replied, voice brittle with dread. If this human, Jackson Reed, truly controls such a creature through will alone, then the Council must prepare containment protocols before knowledge of his methods spreads among his species. Carthuan growled softly. Then let me go as security. If this human tries to use his beast against us, I will ensure our team returns home intact. Carthuan nodded. You will accompany Thrixer as his protector. Jean will pilot the insertion vessel and maintain orbit fallback. We leave within the cycle. The young scholar shifted in his seat, mandibles twitching. Elder, do we know anything else about this human? His past, his affiliations. Carthuan's secondary eyelids slid over his eyes as he opened another file on the screen. Jackson's personnel records flickered across the display. Ex-military, special reconnaissance, survival instructor, combat medic training, fluent in 6 Earth languages, solitary conservation biologist. He left human military service 8 cycles ago, Carthuan said softly. Since then he has lived alone in the Siberian wilderness, protecting and studying these creatures. His colleagues called him the Tiger Whisperer. For a moment, the hall seemed to shiver in unison, as if the idea itself carried an unspoken terror. A human who walked with the deadliest predator of his death world, unarmed, unafraid. Carthuan watched the looping footage again. Jackson leaned back against the tiger's massive flank as if it were a warm couch. Snow drifted down upon them both, settling in his short-cropped hair and on the thick ruff of the tiger's neck. Its eyes closed in drowsy peace, and Jackson closed his eyes with it, breathing in the wild winter air as though it belonged to him alone. Carthuan closed the file with a sharp motion. Prepare your teams. You leave within 6 standard hours. As the council chamber emptied, Thrixer remained seated, staring at the frozen image on the data screen, the human leaning against the predator, eyes closed in perfect calm. In that moment, the young scholar felt the first true stab of fear in his academic life. For the first time, he wondered whether Earth's classification as a death world was not simply about its beasts or toxins or storms. Perhaps it was about them. About humans. Because if a human could tame the deadliest predator on their planet, what hope did the galaxy have of taming them? Outside the viewing window, Sirius Prime burned in cold brilliance, its pale light casting long shadows across the silent council chamber. Thrixer stood and turned away, the question echoing in his mind like a prophecy. They had always feared Earth's predators. But now, they feared the predator who fed them. The shuttle descended through thick coils of storm cloud, its engine straining against freezing crosswinds that battered its hull. Inside, Thrixer clutched the armrests of his restrained seat, his mandibles pressed tight to contain the nausea twisting through his gut. Outside the cockpit window, endless plains of snow stretched in every direction, broken only by tangled forests of skeletal birch and black pine. The world below seemed devoid of life, yet his data tablet flickered constant warnings of apex predators in every biome. Jean guided the vessel down with skilled precision. The pilot's dark blue carapace gleamed under cabin lights as he adjusted retrothrusters, angling for the narrow clearing their satellite maps had marked beside the human's dwelling. Without looking back he said, "Touchdown in 60 seconds. External temperature -42 Celsius. Atmospheric density within tolerable margins, though oxygen saturation remains high. Prepare thermal suits." Carthuan, the guard, shifted beside Thrixer, his massive tail coiling protectively around his armored legs. His scaled hands moved with mechanical efficiency, checking the power pack of his plasma carbine and sealing his thermal armor plates. The expression on his broad reptilian face never changed. Whether boarding a pirate warship or landing on the deadliest world known to the Galactic Council, Carthuan's demeanor remained carved from stone. Carthuan stood behind them, hunched and silent. His ridged back plates creaked softly as he flexed his limbs after hours of orbit deceleration. His old eyes remained fixed on the viewscreen, watching their approach with a resignation that spoke of centuries spent studying civilizations that would never understand each other. Deploying landing struts, Jean announced calmly. The shuttle shuddered once as its feet broke through a crust of ice to solid ground beneath. Hydraulic pistons groaned. A hiss of vented steam coiled into the frozen wind. For a moment there was only silence. "Envoy team disembark," Carthuan ordered softly. Thrixer's claws trembled against his tablet as he rose. The shuttle hatch dilated with a deep mechanical sigh, and a blast of frigid air stabbed through his exposed chitin plates despite the insulated suit that now sealed around his thin frame. He stepped forward, boots crunching into powder-fine snow, and nearly fell as the surface gave way to hidden drifts. Corthian grabbed his arm to steady him. "Watch your footing, scholar. This planet does not forgive mistakes." They moved as a unit into the clearing, their breath fogging instantly, crystallizing around their face shields. The shuttle powered down behind them, leaving only the whisper of the icy wind and the distant haunting howl of something large moving beyond the tree line. Thrixer checked his atmospheric scanner again. The readings flickered with life signs. Countless life signs. He swallowed, his mandibles clicking dryly. So much biomass. This world is overflowing with it. How does anything survive here without constant predation? Perhaps it doesn't, Carthuan rasped, moving with surprising grace for his age as he stepped forward. His gaze fixed on the shapes ahead. Through the thin veil of drifting snow, a small wooden structure came into view. It was primitive by council standards, built from rough-hewn logs stacked atop each other with overlapping seams sealed by tar and moss. Thick smoke curled from a metal chimney, the scent of burning pine drifting toward them, sharp and acrid in their nasal filters. Beside the cabin a figure moved. Thrixer's heart stuttered at the sight. Jackson Reed stood in the clearing, splitting logs with swift, practiced blows of his axe. Each strike buried the steel head into frozen birch rounds, sending shockwaves through his thick forearms. He wore only a sleeveless thermal undershirt despite the killing cold, sweat steaming off his exposed shoulders, his breath fogging into the storm winds before vanishing. The tiger lay beside the woodpile, its massive head resting on outstretched paws, eyes half closed in lazy contentment. Snow gathered across its broad back in silent testament to how long it had remained unmoving. Yet Thrixer could see the slow twitch of its tail tip, the ripple of muscle under striped fur as its nostrils flared, scenting the new arrivals instantly. Jackson paused, resting his axe head against a stump. He turned slightly, gaze flicking up toward the tree line where the alien team crouched in half cover. His eyes were a pale iron gray, sharp even at this distance. He reached down without looking and rested his palm on the tiger's massive head, fingers curling into thick winter fur. "You can come out," he called in accented standard, his voice carrying easily through the silent forest. "I see you." Thrixer froze. His breath thundered in his ears. The human's eyes seemed to look directly into his soul despite their different biology. Corthian moved forward first, plasma carbine at the ready but angled downward to avoid immediate provocation. Carthuan followed, walking with deliberate calm, arms held slightly wide to display his empty claws. Jackson watched them approach with an expression Thrixer could not read. Not fear. Not aggression. Merely assessment. His gaze moved over their thermal suits, their weapons, the insignia of the Galactic Council embroidered on Carthuan's chest plate. "Diplomats," Jackson said softly. "Or spies. Either way, you're a long way from home." Thrixer stepped forward despite the tremble in his legs. "Jackson Reed." His translator chirped the name with mechanical precision. "That's me," Jackson replied. He ran a thick finger down the tiger's cheek ruff, scratching gently until the beast rumbled in pleasure, vibrating the snow with its deep purr. "What brings a council team to my forest? Last I heard, you people weren't allowed within 500 clicks of human territory." Carthuan inclined his head. "We come to observe. To understand. Your relationship with this creature has raised grave concerns." Jackson's eyes narrowed. His jaw clenched once before relaxing. "She's not a creature. She's a tiger. Her name is Misha." Misha opened one golden eye, flicked her ear, and settled again with a chuffing sigh that sent steam curling from her nostrils. Her paws were as large as Thrixer's chest plate, her claws retracted but visible within dark velvet sheaths. Corthian shifted his weight, tail lashing slowly across the snow. "Your control over it is impressive," he growled, though his voice carried both admiration and fear. "It's not control," Jackson said, turning fully to face them. His presence seemed to fill the clearing, taller than Carthuan had expected, broader than any council soldier. "It's trust. Mutual respect." Thrixer forced himself to breathe slowly, trying to keep his recorder steady despite the tremor in his claws. "How did you accomplish it? Such a feat is biologically unprecedented among sentient species. Even bonded predators retain kill instinct toward their handlers." Jackson tilted his head. For a moment he said nothing, only studied the young scholar with eyes as cold as the wind whipping across the treetops. Then he crouched down beside Misha, pressing his forehead to her massive muzzle. The tiger exhaled in a low purr, her eyes closing as his hands rubbed behind her ears in calm affection. Because, Jackson said quietly, his voice almost lost in the storm, I didn't try to break her. I let her break me. I let her teach me what she is. Once I understood, she let me close. Carthuin felt a chill deeper than the cold around him. This human had not used weapons, sedatives, or neural implants. He had used humility, submission, understanding. And through that he had achieved what no known species could, harmony with a lethal apex predator. The wind gusted suddenly, sending a swirl of snow between them. In that moment of veiled sight, Misha rose silently to her feet. When the wind cleared, she was standing in front of Jackson, muscles rippling beneath thick striped fur, her great head lowered slightly as she stared directly at Carthuin. Her lips peeled back just enough to reveal the tips of her fangs, and her tail flicked once in silent warning. Carthuin stiffened, plasma carbine rising a fraction before he forced himself to lower it again. He met the tiger's gaze for only a moment before looking down, his throat pulsing with silent submission. Misha snorted and turned away, her warning given, patting back to curl herself around Jackson's legs like an oversized house cat. Jackson's eyes flicked to Carthuin, hard and unblinking. You came all this way to watch me feed a tiger. You've seen what you came to see. Now go. Carthuin hesitated. His mind raced with protocols, diplomatic de-escalation scripts, fallback contingencies in case of violent escalation. But none applied here. He saw it clearly now. This human did not threaten them with aggression or weapons. His power was something far older and far more dangerous. The ability to understand, to integrate, to become part of what should have destroyed him. Perhaps we will, Carthuin said softly, bowing his head. But we will return. Jackson did not answer. He turned away from them, scratching behind Misha's ear as he walked back toward the cabin. The tiger followed silently, her tail curling around his thigh for a moment like a lover's hand before flicking away into the drifting snow. Thrixer let out a slow breath he hadn't realized he was holding. His legs felt weak. Around him, the forest was silent once more except for the whispering wind. The shuttle powered up behind them, engines thrumming softly, ready to return them to orbit. Carthuin turned back one last time as Jackson disappeared into his cabin, the tiger settling by the doorway like an ancient guardian statue. The elder felt an ache in his chest, a terrible certainty blooming cold and sharp within him. They had come seeking knowledge. What they found was a reminder that the deadliest predator on Earth was not the tiger. It was the human who walked beside it. Snow fell in thicker sheets as the envoy team retreated to their shuttle. The cold bit into their thermal suits with merciless persistence, but no one spoke of discomfort. Each carried a silence heavier than the biting wind, a silence born of something deeper than fear, a dawning realization that the universe might never be the same again. Inside the cabin, Jean powered the engines to idle, maintaining atmospheric drift while they regrouped. Carthuin sat by the sensor station, staring blankly at the data feed still streaming from his chest recorder. Thrixer remained near the observation window, mandibles twitching as he watched the cabin vanish into snowbound dusk. Carthuin paced near the hatch, his carbine powered down but gripped tightly in thick-scaled hands. His tail lashed in short, agitated sweeps across the steel floor. We should have detained him, he rumbled finally. Brought him in for study. He poses a clear strategic threat. Thrixer turned, his golden compound eyes dull with exhaustion. Detained him? His voice came out brittle, sharp. Did you see what just happened down there? We aren't equipped to detain someone like him. He's not dangerous because of his size or his strength. He's dangerous because he understands. Carthuin hissed softly, a dismissive sound. Understanding doesn't stop plasma fire. No, Thrixer replied, gesturing weakly at the window where snowflakes clung to the thermal glass. But what happens after you fire? What happens when the rest of his species learns what he did? What he was capable of? That a human tamed a predator that makes your planet's war beasts look like cattle? Carthuin's tail froze mid-sweep. He said nothing more. Carthuin exhaled slowly. We came to observe, not to provoke. If we had threatened him, we would not be here to discuss the wisdom of it. The old elder shifted in his seat, his scaled plates creaking softly under his robe. His gaze fixed on Thrixer, studying the young scholar with tired but attentive eyes. You were close to him, Carthuin said softly. Closer than any of us dared approach. Tell me, what did you see? Thrixer's mandibles clicked once, twice, a subconscious nervous gesture. He folded his arms around his tablet, hugging it to his chest like a shield. His mind replayed the moment Jackson rested his forehead against the tiger's massive muzzle, The look of calm in his pale eyes, the easy affection in his voice as he whispered the tiger's name. I saw, Thrixer swallowed, voice catching. I saw a human who understood death intimately. Who accepted it. Who never tried to bend the world to his will but instead let himself bend to it. And through that, he became something the tiger could trust. Carthuan remained silent for several heartbeats, letting the words settle into the shuttle's humming stillness. Outside, a gust of wind rattled ice against the hull like skeletal claws. The elder turned back to the sensor feed, watching the infrared signature of the cabin flicker within the storm. Do you know why humans frighten us, Thrixer? Carthuan asked softly. Thrixer shook his head. Because when faced with danger, most species flee. When faced with predators, they hide or build walls. When faced with the impossible, they turn away and seek easier paths. But humans, his voice grew quieter, each word landing like a falling stone. Humans walk into the jaws of the beast. And instead of running, they offer it their hand. Thrixer shivered despite the thermal suit's insulation. What will we tell the council? The truth, Carthuan rasped, tired eyes closing for a moment. That we found a human who walks with monsters. That we saw him feed the deadliest predator on his world with bare hands. That he has achieved what no known civilization ever has, not through force, but through humility. Jean spoke up from the cockpit without turning. Orbit window reopens in 40 minutes. Extraction trajectory plotted. Carthuan nodded absently. His mind was elsewhere, sifting through ancient council protocols, strategic contingencies, containment doctrines. None of them felt adequate anymore. Thrixer turned back to the window. Snow whirled in thick white curtains, obscuring everything beyond the shuttle's running lights. But in his mind's eye he saw Jackson again, standing tall beside the tiger, his broad hand resting against its muzzle, eyes calm and unafraid. He thought of his earliest studies, back when he was a larval scholar reading about Earth's hazard index classifications. He remembered the terrifying footage of crocodiles lunging from murky rivers, of polar bears rending seals on drifting ice, of great white sharks bursting from ocean depths with prey clamped in jaws half the size of a council scout ship's hull. He remembered thinking humans must live in constant terror to survive among such monsters. Now he realized he had been wrong. Humans didn't just survive among monsters. They became them. They learned from them. They became something far beyond the sum of teeth and claws, a creature that could sit in the frozen wilderness, feeding death with his bare hands and calling it by name. Carthuan broke the silence again, his voice softer this time. If he teaches others. Carthuan's brow plates lowered. Then we face a species capable of taming the universe itself. Silence fell once more, thick as snowfall. Each of them felt the same cold certainty settle into their bones. There would be no containment strategy, no easy diplomatic solution. This encounter was only the beginning of something larger, something that would ripple outward beyond the boundaries of their knowledge. John's console beeped softly. Orbital window open. Departing now. The engines hummed to full power, and the shuttle lifted smoothly from the snow-choked clearing. As it rose, Thrixer caught one last glimpse of the cabin below through a thinning swirl of storm. The tiger sat by the doorway, massive and silent, its golden eyes watching the departing vessel with unreadable intent. Beside it stood Jackson, arms crossed over his broad chest, gaze lifted to meet theirs through the dimming twilight. Their eyes locked for a heartbeat that seemed to stretch forever. Thrixer felt his heart's pound in unison. Jackson raised one hand in silent farewell, or perhaps silent warning. Then the storm swallowed him, and the clearing vanished beneath thick banks of roiling cloud. Inside the shuttle no one spoke. The engines carried them up through darkness and drifting ice crystals, out into the black void where the planet shrank below them. Carthuan watched the blue-white sphere fade into shadow and felt a shiver crawl down his spine. They had come to observe an anomaly. Instead, they had glimpsed a truth older than their council's founding. There was no apex predator on Earth. There was only the human, and the monsters that chose to walk beside him. As the shuttle docked with their orbital cruiser, Thrixer closed his tablet and sat in silence. The report he would draft would change their civilization's understanding of humanity forever. But as his mandibles rested against folded claws, a single unbidden thought whispered through his mind. If humans could tame their world's deadliest predator, what might they do with the rest of the galaxy? The council chamber was silent as the envoy's report played across the vast holoscreen. Footage of Jackson Reed feeding the tiger flickered before hundreds of delegates. His thick hands brushing aside snowy fur, the predator's jaws closing gently around meat, eyes half closed in feline bliss. There was no fear in his expression, only calm acceptance of the creature pressed against him, its tail curling around his thigh with possessive ease. When the recording ended, Elder Carthuan remained at the center podium, claws resting lightly against the stone. His scaled eyelids closed for a moment as if gathering thoughts too heavy to bear. Around him, delegates shifted uncomfortably on cushioned benches, whispering in languages of clicks, growls, whistles, and musical hums. The hall felt smaller somehow, as if humanity's shadow pressed against its curved walls. "This is unprecedented," rasped Counselor Vishta, her silver feathers dull in the muted light. "No known species has domesticated an apex predator without neural implants or forced subjugation. How did he achieve this?" Carthuan opened his eyes. "Through understanding. Through humility. Through a willingness to become prey before becoming kin." A ripple of confusion crossed the chamber. Carthuan, still wearing his half-armored suit, shifted his weight with a low, uneasy growl. "Explain, Elder." Carthuan gestured to the frozen image on the holoscreen. Jackson kneeling before the tiger, head pressed to its muzzle, eyes closed in perfect trust. "Most species seek to dominate," Carthuan said softly. "They conquer, they subdue, they bend the wild to their will. But this human did not. He allowed himself to be vulnerable. He let the tiger teach him its ways, its moods, its silences. Only then did it accept him as its own." Thrixer stepped forward from the envoy line, his mandibles trembling. "That is why he is dangerous. He doesn't conquer through force. He conquers through understanding. And if he teaches other humans to do the same." Vishta's feathers flared in alarm. "Then what hope does the galaxy have of resisting them? Our defenses are designed against weapons and armies, not minds that merge with threats and turn them into allies." Carthuan's old eyes grew distant. "The question is not whether we can resist them. The question is whether we should." Silence fell heavy and suffocating. For a moment, even the circulation fans seemed to hush, as if the chamber itself leaned in to hear his words. Carthuan snarled softly. "They are a deathworld species. Their aggression, their adaptability, these will always make them a threat." "Or an ally," Carthuan countered gently. His gaze moved across the delegates, searching their fearful eyes. "We fear them because they are everything we are not. But what if we chose to learn from them instead of fearing them? What if we allowed them to teach us to tame what we dread most within ourselves?" A harsh trill of disapproval rose from a cluster of insectoid counselors. "That is naive idealism. They will consume us as they consume everything else. Have you forgotten their history? Their world burns with their wars." Carthuan's brow plates lowered. "And yet that human lives alone in silence, walking with a predator that could end him in a breath, and chooses to feed it instead. What does that say about their potential if guided rather than opposed?" No one answered. Across the holoscreen, the footage shifted to Jackson standing beside Misha as the snow swirled around them. His eyes were pale gray, calm and sharp, as if they saw through the veil of the universe itself. Thrixer watched the looping images, his mandibles pressed tight. Deep inside, beyond fear and logic, something burned within him, a small flicker of awe that refused to be extinguished. This human, standing in the killing frost with his living weapon curled protectively around his legs, was more than an anomaly. He was a harbinger of what humanity could become if it chose. Carthuan's voice rose again, steady and clear despite age cracking its edges. "We must decide now. Do we isolate them further, enforce planetary quarantines, risk angering a species capable of taming death itself? Or do we engage them as equals, despite the terror that prospect inspires?" Vishta's feathers rattled with a shiver. "If we reach out and they refuse, they will see it as weakness. Then we show them strength," Carthuan said. "The strength to listen. The courage to stand unarmed before a predator and extend our hand in trust." As he did. For a long moment no one spoke. The council chamber seemed suspended in the quiet before a storm. Then Thrixer stepped forward once more, his slender frame trembling but his voice strong. "I volunteer," he said. His translator amplified each click and hum into steady standard. "Send me as emissary. Let me be the one who learns from them. Who learns from him." Carthuan's gaze softened. "It will be dangerous. He walks with death each day." Thrixer's mandibles twitched into a flickering echo of a smile. "Then let him teach me how to do the same." The chamber erupted in low murmurs. Some voices spoke of folly, others of bravery, but none could deny the silent truth blooming among them. Something had changed today. Something irreversible. Carthuan turned back to the holoscreen. Jackson stood with his arms folded across his chest, the tiger sitting by his side like a guardian spirit born of frost and hunger. Snow clung to his short hair, gathered against the thick fur of the tiger's ruff. His eyes seemed to look straight into the camera, unblinking, unafraid, daring the universe to challenge the peace he had made. In that moment, Carthuan saw the future. A future where humans walked among the stars not as conquerors, but as something far more terrifying. As those who understood all things and bent them not through force, but through acceptance. Through will. Through an unbreakable calm in the face of death. He closed the session with a single command. Prepare diplomatic protocols. We leave for Earth within the cycle. Outside the great domed windows, Sirius Prime burned with pale fire, casting cold light across the silent chamber. Somewhere far below, a human and his tiger sat in quiet companionship as snow drifted through an endless wilderness. Unaware that the universe had shifted upon his shoulders, or perhaps aware, and simply unconcerned. For in the end it was not the tiger's teeth or claws that terrified the council, nor the human strength or skill. It was the look in his eyes as he fed death with his bare hands. The look that said, "I have nothing left to fear." And for the first time in its long, unbroken reign among the stars, the Galactic Council knew the meaning of true fear. Because they understood that the deadliest predator on Earth had never been the tiger. It was the human who dared to walk beside it.